Hey all, and welcome back to the final part of Mega Man 2 for the Game Boy. Because yes, this is another very short game, just like Dr. Wily's Revenge was. But in the first part you saw us just plough through the 4 Mega Man 2 NES Robot Masters that returned in this game. And now, you might remember I mentioned in passing, we're going to be fighting the Mega Man 3 Robot Masters, or at least 4 of them. And what this game does differently to, say, the Mega Man 2 boss rush in Wily's Revenge is they actually constructed new levels for each of these Mega Man 3 Robot Masters. Well, I say new, it's new in terms of the actual level layouts. These look like the Mega Man 3 NES stages. But they did actually go out their way to make like new level layouts to accommodate for the fact that they have a smaller screen and just generally keeps it fresh, I guess. But yeah, you can see this is very much just visually a grayscale take on Needleman's stage from Mega Man 3 NES. Which I'm honestly okay with. I know it's not technically a new level because we've seen it in the NES game, but like I would rather have this than say the problem that Mega Man 3 NES itself had, where they just reused stages from earlier in the game for the later parts. Like, I don't mean the Wily stages in that game, because Mega Man 3's Wily stages were actually pretty fun, but I mean in terms of like, that game had the Doc Robot boss rush thing, where it reused bosses from Mega Man 2, and that kind of made the game drag purely because they were reusing the stages that we'd already been through in the same game. And yeah, I think I've bitched about Dog Robot enough on this channel as it is, so moving on. This game, I did realise I didn't actually mention the story at all in the first part. And I know that kind of becomes a trend with Mega Man games, that the story really doesn't make itself apparent until later on in the game. Like, again, with Mega Man 3 NES, you wouldn't know anything about the whole Wily working with Light and then all that bullshit that went down in game, because it really doesn't tell you that much at the start. But the story in this game is that Dr. Wily had stolen a time skimmer device, which essentially allowed him to time travel. And yeah, I know, time travel in Mega Man, that'd be happening again in the Wily Wars. But what this allowed him to do was he used it to travel, and I have a number here which I believe I got from the Mega Man knowledge base, which is 37.426 years into the future. I imagine that information probably came from like an instruction manual or some shit, but I don't know. I just found that number online and rolled with it. And what he did when he was in the future at that particular point is that he found a future Mega Man. Like, he met up with Mega Man in the future, and that particular form of Mega Man would go along with Wily, and Wily would sort of rework him into this robot Quint. Now, it is important to make the distinction that Quint is actually not part of the Mega Man Killer series that made themselves quite prominent throughout the entirety of the Game Boy series, at least to my knowledge. Like, if you remember in Dr. Wily's Revenge, the first Game Boy game, we faced off against a robot called Enka, who was the first of the Mega Man Killer series, which, if I recall correctly, they were all built by Wily as well, I imagine they were. But Quint isn't one of them. We won't actually be seeing more of the Mega Man Killers until later Game Boy games. Like, I think the other two, bear in mind I haven't played these games, I haven't even seen them, I'm just going by information I've seen so far. But I believe they're called Punk and Ballad, because like, yeah, I've been doing a bit of digging around on the knowledge base purely for stuff to talk about, because I thought that like I'll get to the other Game Boy games in time, but I sort of want to take them on one at a time, just so I can kind of get my full judgment of each game as an individual. And then in the later games I can start doing more comparative commentary once I've played all of them. And I'm not giving an ETA for when those playthroughs will be, because, you know, I like to do things at my own pace, as counterproductive as that is. But I'm getting distracted now, so yeah. Quint is his own thing, he's completely separate, he is just Mega Man from the future, who's been turned evil by Wily. And this seems to be like Wily's main gig, really. I don't know if you noticed that he just takes good robots, makes them bad. If you think like Mega Man 1 on the NES, all them robots that he first corrupted were, I believe they were all Lights robots, so like Elect Man, Cut Man, Bomb Man and that. They were all like utility robots that Wily turned evil and made them try to take over the world on his behalf and just cause terror, you know, that sort of stuff, staying civil. But yeah, so he's done that, and then there's also things like in Mega Man 3 NES, which I'm pretty sure had happened before this, given the fact we have Mega Man 3 Robot Master showing up here. But if you remember, the story of that was he was working with Light on this good robot Gamma. I forget Gamma's actual intended purpose, but again, Wily turned Gamma evil. And that, to me, kind of raises questions about Wily's ability as a creator. Some of his most intimidating designs aren't actually his designs, he's just essentially appropriated other people's robots for his own purposes. We were saying that a lot of the classic series robots were Wily's. Like, I believe the Mega Man 3 robots were Wily, same with the 2 ones. And I think 4's were Cossack's robots. Like, I know part of the plot of that game was that Cossack had been made out to be evil, and so I'm pretty sure that was just appropriating the robots that he had made for evil purposes. And it gets a bit more questionable with 5. I'm pretty sure 5 were Wily's, you know, because the whole Proto Man is evil thing was obviously bullshit from the start, so that would have been Wily's creations essentially disguising themselves as Proto Man's creations. But yeah, we just went through Magnet Man's stage, and Magnet Man's stage I really have issue with in this game, not because of the level, because the level itself is perfectly fine, but more because I love Magnet Man's theme in the NES game. And so to have that replaced entirely by some shitty Mega Man 2 Game Boy song, nah, I'm not too big on that. And same with like Hard Man Stage here. You know, like Hard Man Stage, it's not exactly the most memorable song, but it's at least pretty, you know, tense. It's a pretty good song in Mega Man 3 to have for the kind of robot that Hard Man is. But no, once we get here, we get whatever the fuck this noise in the background is here right now. I don't know how they dropped the ball so bad with music in this game, because like if you remember in Dr. Wily's Revenge, the music in that, like, it wasn't amazing, but it was still decent. Like, you could still listen to it and enjoy yourself listening to it, whereas this is just, nah. I know I'm repeating myself from the first part here, but like, it bears repeating. These songs are really bad in this game, and it's kind of disheartening when that happens with games, that like something just really drops the ball. Especially Mega Man, because Mega Man, I think, on the whole, outside of this, it's one of the most consistently good series for music, next to maybe Sonic. So, like with the exceptions in Sonic, like the Game Boy Advance games and the obvious one of Sonic Chronicles, it just really stands out when there's a bad Sonic soundtrack, and just like here, it really stands out when there's a bad Mega Man soundtrack. Like this, I'll give it some credit in that there's at least a melody in this song. And like the others tried to have melodies. Like I know I went first in with probably one of the worst video game songs ever, which is Metal Man's theme in this game, because Metal Man's theme in this game is the worst, I'll probably say, at least from what I can recall. The other songs, I don't remember them, which usually that would be a bad sign with a soundtrack, whereas here, because I don't remember them, it means it's not as terribly bad. It's just, you know, generic shit, but still, none of the music in this game is even remotely close to being good. That's kind of what I'm getting at here, really. But that's 3 of the Mega Man 3 robots down now. There's just one more, and it's actually going to be Top Man we go after next. And Top Man, I usually go to him quite early on in Mega Man 3. Like, he is just one of the earlier bosses I fight. to be in this game and I've already got his weakness. You know, it's a little bit all over the place because Top Man in Mega Man 3 NES, he's one of the easiest bosses to fight without his weakness. And the reason for that is that he's got a very predictable pattern that you can just jump over him, shoot him with a Mega Buster. Usually, I actually go to him second, and the main reason for that is that I like having Snake Man's weapon ahead of time. Like, I like having Snake Man's weapon not for the boss, but for the stage, because there's them cat enemies, which we all see in this version as well, where they're slightly above on a bit of a cliff that you have to jump up to. And it's useful to have Snake Man's weapon in 3 that they can just like feed along the floor and then climb up and then hit the enemy. Which, you know, you don't need it. Like in this game, like they're much slower as well, so I can just spam metal blades at him, which you wouldn't have in 3 on the NES. Like metal blades are very useful wherever they show up, admittedly, you know. But yeah, Top Man, he does actually have that same pattern here. The reason why he's not quite as easy is that where the screen is smaller, it's that little bit more difficult to predict where he's going to spin to. It's not like hard, you're not going to struggle with it, you're probably not going to fuck up against him, but it's just that little bit more finicky to jump over him than it is in the NES game. But you know, that's them's the breaks when you're talking about handheld adaptation, so whatever. And yeah, I was trying to be clever by shooting down at that guy, but as you can tell, it didn't work out quite as well as I would have liked. That's one thing, sometimes I try to be cool in these games, in these playthroughs, but it quite often just goes tits up, and you know, I end up feeling a bit, I wish that worked. Oh, I have the most bizarre things that flare up my little obsessive quirks. That's one thing that I can say about recording these LPs, is that it really accentuates my obsessive tendencies, and I know a lot of that comes down to like my anxiety and whatnot, but just the little things that I notice about myself that like, that shouldn't be an issue, that really should not be an issue, and literally no one would have noticed or cared if I hadn't pointed it out. But I feel compelled to point it out because I made a mistake and I fucked up, and that's embarrassing me. Like, psychology is weird, and it's bizarre how it was internet Let's Plays that awakened that within me. But one thing that I didn't think to mention when this screen came out after I beat Hardman is that particular screen where you got Mega Man and Rush Point in. If you're on the part where you just beat Hardman and you stop it at the right frame, like you pause it at the right frame, then you do see Mega Man pointing forward and it says "You got hard," which is a epic meme that I see going around sometimes. But anyway, ladies and gentlemen, this is our main enemy. This is Quint. This is future Mega Man, who somewhere along the lines acquired a drill, which, as you can see, is doing literally fuck all to benefit him. But his drill item is called the Sakugane. I think that's how you pronounce it. You know, I'm not good with pronouncing long words. But yeah, essentially when you use it, it's the same as how it was when he just tried pathetically to hit us with it then. You bounce up and down on top of it. And that is essentially what his weapon does. But that battle there, that battle raises a bit of a question in my mind. And yes, we are going into time travel fuckery here, because that was future Mega Man, who was attempting to defeat past Mega Man. And if you know anything about the potential time travel theories, there are some ways in which that would cause a massive paradox that would fuck everything over. It's like an even more direct example of, say, the grandfather paradox. If you don't know, the grandfather paradox is a theory where, or not really a theory, it's just a paradox where if you were to travel back in time and kill your grandfather, then that would result in a situation where you theoretically would have never been born. And there's different like ideas of how that would be worked around, whether that would like spread out into an alternate timeline, whether that would just be the kind of thing where something would happen, like maybe he'd already impregnated your grandmother, or you know, there would have been something in time that would have prevented this from being an issue. There's all these different theories of what it may or may not be. But what Quint is doing here to Mega Man is essentially abridging that, making that even more direct, of trying to kill his past self. And that is even more simpler of a potential paradox than the grandfather paradox, because it's like, if you went back in time and you killed yourself, would that end your future life? Would your future life be a separate entity at that point? Like, is this where you get like alternate timelines coming in? Or would it be the sort of deal where Quint was destined to lose that battle? Like, Mega Man, present day Mega Man, was destined to win it purely because time as we know it, like the preset time flow, just wouldn't work had there been another outcome. It's one of these things that I'm really fascinated by time travel theory, purely because it's the kind of thing that, as it stands right now, there is no way to test this. So all we have are ideas, and all these different ideas are both as credible and uncredible as each other, because there is no way to test it. And this is something that I've looked into quite a bit actually in the past, usually when I'm up late at night and I'm wondering what to do with myself, and I just start clicking around at all these different scientific theories. And the reason why it's impossible for us to time travel, at least to my understanding, is that there's not enough energy in the world to force us off of the natural timeline. Because there have been times when we've lost like fractions of a second from like earthquakes and different natural events where there's been a sudden crash of energy, and that has been why we've just like lost a second, gained a second, or whatever happened. Whereas if it takes that much energy, that much, you know, pressure to dodge us around to that small of a time difference, then to get something that's noticeable, you know, we have no hope in hell of generating that much energy in our lifetime. And it'd be incredibly dangerous, and it'd generate all kinds of ethical concerns if people were to try it. So it's not the sort of thing that we're going to be able to test in our lifetime, but it's just fascinating seeing all these different theories that come up. But yes, this is the final boss. It's very basic Wily machine deal, it has multiple phases. And here he's going to embed himself in what looks like a dinosaur body. I don't know if that's trying to tie into the timeline thing, like if he's been in the future to retrieve Quint, has he also been in the past to retrieve dinosaur designs to be inspired by? I don't fucking know. This is a little bit complex of a final phase because it's the little skull thing on his chest that flashes when he gets hit, but he takes damage when you hit him on the head. And yeah, his actual weakness is the Sakagane, but that's such a risky thing to use because you take damage as you fall down into him. But yeah, that's him beaten. So yeah, that was a little sporadic, all over the place little playthrough of Mega Man 2 for the Game Boy. And to wrap up my final thoughts, because we're getting into another one of these credits where it doesn't actually credit people, situations like we had with Dr. Wily's Revenge here. But I think Mega Man 2 on the Game Boy, I like it about as much as I do Wily's Revenge. It plays quite similarly. It's got a lot of ideas. Like, I don't really get what Inafune was talking about in terms of like the level design not being up to Mega Man standards, because it's kind of similar, but like the music shit, that's what lets it down, that's what drops it a few points. But yep, that's pretty much all I have to say left about this game now. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been Mega Man 2 for the Game Boy. I have been the Flameclaw, and I will see you next time for another playthrough. Bye bye for now.